Question. If everything exists now, or at once, how can it be added to through constant creation and expansion? Or to put it another way, if we are constantly reacting, how can all that is exist as a complete now? Answer. All that is not done and finished. Everything within your three-dimensional system occurs simultaneously. Each action creates other possibilities of itself, or other actions from the infinite energy of the universe, which itself is never still. The answer is that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. All that is simultaneously and unendingly creates itself. Only within your particular frame of reference does there seem to be a contradiction between action that is simultaneous and yet unending. This has to do mainly with the necessary distortions arising from your time concept and the idea of duration, for duration to you presupposes existence continued within a time framework, predisposing to beginnings and endings. Experience existing outside of that reference is not dependent upon duration in your terms. There is no quote-unquote perfect ending, no completed perfection beyond which further experience is impossible or meaningless. All that is a source of infinite and unending simultaneous action. Everything happens at once, and yet there is no beginning and end to it in your terms, so it is not completed in your terms at any given point. Your idea of development and growth again implies a one-line march toward perfection, so it would be difficult for you to imagine the kind of order that pervades. Ultimately, a completed or finished God, or all that is, would end up smothering his creation, for perfection presupposes the point beyond which development is impossible and creativity at an end. There would be an order in which only predestination could rule, each part fitting in with a particular order without freedom to change the pattern given it. There is order, but within this order there is freedom, the freedom of creativity, that characteristic of all that is that guarantees its infinite becoming. Now, in that infinite becoming, there are states that you would call perfected, but had creativity rested within them, all of experience would be destined to grind to a halt. Yet this great complexity is not unwieldy. It is as simple, in fact, as a seed. All that is inexhaustible. Infinity rests within simultaneous action in a way that you cannot presently understand. All that is alive within the least of itself, aware within, for example, the molecule. It endows all of its parts, or its creations, with its own abilities, and then acts as inspiration, impetus, guiding lines and principles by which these parts then seek to further create themselves, their own worlds and systems. This is freely given. These powers and abilities will be used by these creations in various ways. In your own case, mankind is forming his reality through the use of these gifts. He is learning to use them efficiently and well. He uses them to exist. They form the basis of his reality. Within that framework, individually and as a whole, mankind may seem to make errors, to bring ill health, death, or desolation upon himself, but he is still using those abilities to create a world. Through observing his creations, he learns how to use these abilities better. He checks on his inner progress by seeing the physical materialization of his work. The work, the reality, is still a creative achievement, although it may portray a tragedy or unspeakable terror in your terms at any given time. Question. How do you account for the pain and suffering in the world? Many people have asked this question. Answer. A great painting of a battle scene, for example, may show the ability of the artist as he projects it in all its appalling drama and inhuman and yet all too human conditions of war. The artist is using his abilities. In the same way, man is using his abilities, and they are apparent when he creates a real war. The artist who paints such a scene may do so for several reasons, because he hopes, through portraying such inhumanity, to awaken people to its consequences, to make them quail and change their ways, because he is himself in such a state of disease and turmoil that he directs his abilities to that particular manner, or because he is fascinated with the problem of destruction and creativity, and of using creativity to portray destruction. In your wars, you are using your creativity to create destruction, but you cannot help being creative. Illness and suffering are not thrust upon you by God, or by all that is, or by an outside agency. They are byproducts of the learning process, created by you, in themselves quite neutral. On the other hand, your existence itself, the reality and nature of your planet, the whole existence in which you have these experiences, are also created by you, using the abilities of which I have spoken. Illness and suffering are the results of the misdirection of creative energy. They are a part of the creative force, however. They do not come from a different source than, say, health and vitality. Suffering is not good for the soul unless it teaches you how to stop suffering. That is its purpose. Within your particular plane of activity, and speaking practically, no one fully or completely can use all of the energy available to them, or completely materialize the inner-sensed identity that is multidimensional. This inner identity is the blueprint, however, against which you judge ultimately your physical actions. You strive to express as best you can the entire potential that is within you. Within that framework, it is possible to have sane and healthy minds within healthy bodies, to have a sane planet. The release and use of creative energy expended simply to maintain your planet and your existence is impossible to conceive of. The great amount of energy available to you gives you great leeway in its use. I have mentioned before that everyone within your system is learning to handle this creative energy, and since you are still in the process of doing so, you will often misdirect it. The resulting snarl in activities automatically brings you back to inner questions. Question. According to the theory of relativity, no particle can be accelerated to the speed of light because its mass would become infinitely large as it approached light's velocity, but this barrier is bypassed by stating that the particles in question have an imaginary proper mass, not rest mass, that is never less than the speed of light. It is asked then, are these faster than light particles as or like the electromagnetic energy units Seth discusses in the appendix of the Seth material? Answer. I told you some time ago that there were many gradations of matter or form that you did not perceive. In your terms, many of these particles making up such constructions do move faster than the speed of your light. Your light, again, represents only a portion of an even larger spectrum than that of which you know, and when your scientists study its properties, they can only investigate light as it intrudes into the three-dimensional system. The same, of course, applies to the study of the structure of matter or form. There are indeed universes composed of such faster-than-light particles. Some of these, in your terms, share the same space as your own universe. You simply would not perceive such particles as mass. When these particles are slowed down sufficiently, you do experience them as matter. Some of these particles drastically alter their velocity, appearing sometimes at your slower rate, usually in cyclic fashion. The inner vortex of some such particles has a much greater velocity than the orbiting portions. Electromagnetic energy units are formed spontaneously from the electromagnetic reality of feelings emitted from each consciousness, as for example, breath automatically goes out from the physical body. Electromagnetic energy units are then emanations from consciousness. The intensity of the thought or emotion determines the characteristics of the units themselves. As certain ranges are reached, they are propelled into physical actualization. Whether or not this occurs in your terms, they will exist as small matter particles, as say latent matter or pseudomatter. Some of these will fall into the faster-than-light groupings and have a perceivable vitality within that framework. These faster-than-light particles, of course, exist in their own kinds of form then,